Warner. Hi, I say. She turns at the sound of my voice and startles when she sees my face. Her eyes widen, and I feel it right away when her emotions change. She's attracted to me. She's attracted to me, and the revelation makes me happy. I don't know why. It's not new. I learned long ago that lots of people find me attractive. Men, women, especially older women. A phenomenon I still don't understand, but this, it makes me happy. She finds me attractive. Hi, she says, but she won't look at me. I realize she's blushing. I'm surprised. There's something sweet about her, something gentle and sweet I wasn't really expecting. Are you doing all right? I ask. It's a stupid question. The girl is clearly in an awful position. Right now, she's only in our custody for as long as it takes my father to decide what to do with her. She's currently in a fairly comfortable holding facility here on base, but she'll likely end up in a juvenile detention center. I'm not sure. I've heard my father talk about running more tests on her first. Her parents are apparently hysterical, desperate for us to take her in and deal with her, offer a diagnosis. They think she killed the little boy on purpose. They think their daughter is insane. I think she seems to be just fine. Better than fine. I can't stop looking at her. My eyes travel her face more than once, studying her features carefully. She seems so familiar to me, like I might have seen her before, maybe in a dream. I'm aware, even as I think, that my thoughts are ridiculous, but I was drawn down here, magnetized to her by something beyond my control. I know I shouldn't have come. I have no business talking to her, and if my father found me in here, he'd likely murder me. But I've tried for days to forget her face, and I couldn't. I try to sleep at night, and her likeness materializes in the blackness. I needed to see her again. I don't know how to defend it. Finally, she speaks, and I shake free from my reverie. I remind myself that I've asked her a question. Yes, thank you, she says, her eyes on the floor. I'm doing fine. She's lying. I want her to look up to meet my eyes. She doesn't, and I find it frustrating. Will you look at me? I say. That works well enough, but when she looks me directly in the eye, I feel my heart go suddenly terrifyingly still, a skipped beat, a moment of death, and then, fast, my heart is racing too fast. I've never understood my ability to be so aware of others, but it's often served me well. In most cases, it offers me an advantage. In this case, it's nothing short of overwhelming. Right now, everything is hitting me twice as hard. I feel two sets of emotions, hers and mine, the both of them intertwined. We seem to be feeling the same things at the same time. It's disorienting, so heady I can hardly catch my breath. I feel a surprising desire to touch her. I want... Why? She says. I blink. What? Why did you want me to look at you? I take a breath, clear my head, consider my options. I could tell the truth. I could tell a lie. I could be evasive, change the subject. Finally I say, do I know you? She laughs and looks away. No, she says. Definitely not. She bites her lip, and I feel her sudden nervousness, hear the spike in her breathing. I draw closer to her almost without realizing it. She looks up at me then, and I realize with a thrill how close we are. There's a palpable heat between our bodies, and her eyes are big and beautiful, blue-green. Like the globe, I think, like the whole world. She's looking at me, and I feel suddenly off balance. What's wrong? She says. I have to step away from her. I look at her again. Are you sure I don't know you? And she smiles at me, and my heart shatters. Trust me, she says. I'd remember you. Genji. De La Lu. I can't believe we forgot about De La Lu. I thought Castle's news would be about Noria. I thought he was going to tell us that she reached out to say that she was some fancy resistance leader now, that we'd be welcome to crash at her place for a while. Instead, Castle's news was De La Lu. Homeboy came through. Castle steps aside and allows the lieutenant to enter the room, and even though he seems stiff and out of place, De La Lu looks genuinely upset. I feel it, like a punch to the gut, the moment I see his face. Brief. He clears his throat 2 or 3 times. When he finally speaks, his voice is steadier than I've ever heard. I've come to reassure you, he says, in person, that I'll make sure your group remains safe here for as long as I can manage. I don't know yet exactly what's happening right now, but I know it can't be good. I'm worried it won't end well if you stay, and I'm committed to helping you while you plan your escape. Everyone is quiet. Thank you? I say, breaking the silence. I look around the room when I say, we really appreciate that, but, how much time do we have? De La Lu shakes his head. I'm afraid I can't guarantee your safety for more than a week, but I'm hoping a few days' reprieve will give you the necessary time to figure out your next steps and find a safe place to go. In the meantime, I'll provide whatever assistance I can. Okay, Ian says, but he looks skeptical. That's really generous. De La Lu clears his throat again. It must be hard to know whether you should trust me. I understand your concerns, but I fear I've stayed silent for too long. He says, his voice is losing its steadiness. And now, with what's happened to Warner and to Miss Ferrars, he stops, his voice breaking on the last words. He looks up, looks me in the eye. I'm sure Warner told none of you that I am his grandfather. My jaw drops open. Actually, drops open. Castle is the only person in the room who doesn't look shocked. You're Warner's grandfather? Adam says, getting to his feet. The terrified look in his eyes breaks my heart. Yes, De La Lu says quietly, on his mother's side. He meets Adam's eyes, acknowledging silently that he knows that Adam is Anderson's illegitimate son, that he knows everything. Adam sits back down in relief, preparing on his face. I can only imagine what an unhappy life yours must have been, Brendan says. I turn to look at him, surprised to hear his voice. He's been so quiet all this time, but then, of course, Brendan would be compassionate, even to someone like De La Lu, who stepped aside and said nothing while Anderson set the world on fire. But I'm grateful. We're all grateful, Brendan says, for your help today. De La Lu manages a smile. It's the least I can do, he says, and turns to go. Did you know her? Lily says, her voice sharp as Ella. De La Lu freezes in place, still half turned toward the exit. Because if you're Warner's grandfather, Lily says, and you've been working under Anderson for this long, you must have known. Slowly, very slowly, De La Lu turns to face us. He seems tense, nervous, like I've never seen him. He says nothing, but the answer is written all over his face, the twitch in his hands. Jesus. How long? I say, anger building inside of me. How long did you know and say nothing? I don't. How long? I say, my hand already reaching for the gun tucked in the waistband of my pants. De La Lu takes a jerky step backward. Please don't, he says, his eyes wild. Please don't ask this of me. I can give you aid. I can provide you with weapons and transportation, anything you need, but I can't. You don't understand. Coward. Zira says, standing up. She's looking stunning, tall and strong and steady. I love watching that girl move, talk, breathe, whatever. You watched and said nothing as Anderson tortured his own children, didn't you? No. De La Lu says desperately, his face flushing with emotion I've never seen in him before. No, that's not. Castle picks up a chair with a single flick of his hand and drops it unceremoniously in front of De La Lu. Sit down, he says, a violent, unguarded rage flashing in his eyes. De La Lu obeys. How long? I say again. How long have you known her as Ella? I've... De La Lu hesitates, looks around. I've known Ella since she was a child. He says finally, I feel the blood leave my body. His clear, explicit confession is too much. It seems too much. I sag under the weight of it, the lies, the conspiracies. I sink back into my chair and my heart splinters for Juliet, for all she suffered at the hands of the people meant to protect her. I still can't believe that De La Lu actually knew Juliet since she was a child. Ella, whatever, Juliet. I'll always see her as Juliet. I can't form the words I need to tell De La Lu he's a spineless piece of shit. It's Nazira who still has the presence of mind to spear him. Her voice is soft, lethal when she speaks. You've known Ella since she was a child, Nazira says. You've been here, working here, helping Anderson since Ella was a child. That means you helped Anderson put her in the custody of abusive adoptive parents, and you stood by as they tortured her, as Anderson tortured her over and over. No, Delalu cries out. I didn't condone any of that. Ella was supposed to grow up in a normal home environment. She was supposed to be given nurturing parents and a stable upbringing. Those were the terms everyone agreed to. Bullshit, Nazira says, her eyes flashing. You know as well as I do that her adoptive parents were monsters. Paris changed the terms of the agreement. Delalu shouts angrily. Oh, I didn't forget to change the voice. Nazira raises an eyebrow, unmoved, but something seems to have loosened Delalu's tongue, something like fear or guilt or pent-up rage, because suddenly the words rush out of him. Paris went back on his word as soon as Ella was in his custody. He thought no one would find out. Back then, he and I were about the same as far as rank went in the reestablishment. We often worked closely together because of our family ties, and I was, as a result, privy to the choices he made. Delalu shakes his head, but I discovered too late that he purposely chose adoptive parents who exhibited abusive, dangerous behavior. When I confronted him about it, he argued that any abuse Ella suffered at the hands of her surrogate parents would only encourage her powers to manifest, and he had the statistics to support his claim. I tried to voice my concerns. I reported him. I told the Council of Commanders that he was hurting her, breaking her, but he made my concerns sound like the desperate histrionics of someone unwilling to do what was necessary for the cause. I can see the color creeping up Delalu's neck, his anger only barely contained. I was repeatedly overruled, demoted. I was punished for questioning his tactics, but I knew Paris was wrong. Ella withered when I first met her. She was a strong girl with a joyful spirit. She was unfailingly kind and upbeat. He hesitates. It wasn't long before she grew cold and closed off. Withdrawn, Paris moved up in rank quickly, and I was soon relegated to little more than his right hand. I was the one he sent to check on her at home, at school. I was ordered to monitor her behavior, write the reports outlining her progress. But there were no results. Her spirit had been broken. I begged Paris to put her elsewhere, to, at the very least, return her to a regular facility, one that I might oversee personally, and still he insisted over and over again that the abuse she suffered would spur results. Delalu is on his feet now, pacing. He was hoping to impress the council, hoping his efforts would be rewarded with yet another promotion. It soon became his single task to wait, to have me watch Ella closely for developments, for any sign that she changed, evolved. He stops in place, swallows hard. But Paris was careless. Delalu drops his head in his hands. The room around us has gone so quiet I can almost hear the seconds pass. We're all waiting for him to keep going, but he doesn't lift his head. I'm studying him, his shaking hands, the tremble in his legs, his general loss of composure, and my heart hammers in my chest. I feel like he's about to break, like he's close to telling us something important. What do you mean? I say quietly. Careless how? Delalu looks up, his eyes red-rimmed and mild. I mean, it was his one job. He says, slamming his fist against the wall. He hits it hard, his knuckles breaking through the plaster, and for a moment I'm genuinely stunned. I didn't think Delalu had it in him. You don't understand, he says, losing the fire. He stumbles back, sags against the wall. My greatest regret in life has been watching those kids suffer and doing nothing about it. Wait, Winston says. Which kids? Who are you talking about? But Delalu doesn't seem to hear him. He only shakes his head. Paris never took Ella's assignment seriously. It was his fault she lost control. It was his fault she didn't know better. It was his fault she hadn't been prepared or trained or properly guarded. It was his fault she killed that little boy. He says, now so broken his voice is shaking. What she did that day nearly destroyed her, nearly ruined the entire operation, nearly exposed us to the world. He closes his eyes, presses his fingers to his temples, and then he sinks back down into his chair. He looks unmoored. Castle and I share a knowing glance from across the room. Something is happening. Something is about to happen. Delalu is a resource we never realized we had, and for all his protests, he actually seems like he wants to talk. Maybe Delalu is the key. Maybe he can tell us what we need to know about everything, about Juliet, about Anderson, about the reestablishment. It's obvious a dam broke open in Delalu. I'm just hoping we can keep him talking. It's Adam who says, if you hated Anderson so much, why didn't you stop him when you had the chance? Don't you understand? Delalu says, his eyes big and round and sad. I never had the chance. I didn't have the authority, and we'd only just been voted into power. Layla, my daughter, was sicker every day, and I wasn't myself. I was unraveling. I suspected foul play in her illness, but had no proof. I spent work hours overseeing the crumbling mental and physical health of any innocent young woman, and I spent my free hours watching my daughter die. Those are excuses, Nazira says coldly. You were a coward. He looks up. Yes, he says. That's true. I was a coward. He shakes his head, turns away. I said nothing, even when Paris spun Ella's tragedy into a victory. He told everyone that what Ella did to that boy was a blessing in disguise, that in fact it was exactly what he'd been working toward. He argued that what she did that day, regardless of the consequences, was the exact manifestation of her powers he'd been hoping for all along. De La Lue looks suddenly sick. He got away with everything. Everything he ever wanted he was given. And he was always reckless. He did lazy work, all the while using Ella as a pawn to fulfill his own sadistic desires. Please be more specific, Castle says coolly. Anderson had a great deal of sadistic desires. Which are you referring to? De La Lue goes pale. His voice is lower, weaker, when he says, Paris has always been perversely fond of destroying his own son. I never understood it. I never understood his need to break that boy. He tortured him 1,000 different ways, but when Paris discovered the depth of Aaron's emotional connection to Ella, he used it to drive that boy near to madness. That's why he shot her, I say, remembering what Juliet Ella told me after Omega Point was bombed. Anderson wanted to kill her to teach Warner a lesson, right? But something changes in De La Lue's face. It transforms him, sags him down, and then he laughs, a sad, broken laugh. You don't understand. You don't understand. You don't understand. He cries, shaking his head. You think these recent events are everything. You think Aaron fell in love with your friend of several months, a rebel girl named Juliet. You don't know. You don't know. You don't know that Aaron has been in love with Ella for the better part of his entire life. They've known each other since childhood. Adam makes a sound, a stunned sound of disbelief. Okay, I have to be honest. I don't get it. Ian says. He steals a wary glance at Nazira before he says, Nazira, I said, Anderson has been wiping their memories. If that's true, then how could Warner be in love with her for so long? Why would Anderson wipe their memories, tell them all about how they know each other, and then wipe their memories again? De La Lue is shaking his head. A strange smile begins to form on his face, the kind of shaky, terrified smile that isn't a smile at all. No, you don't. He sighs and looks away. Paris has never told either of them about their shared history. The reason he had to keep wiping their memories was because it didn't matter how many times he reset the story or remade the introductions. Aaron always fell in love with her, every time. Wow. In the beginning, Paris thought it was a fluke. He found it almost funny, entertaining, but the more it happened, the more it began to drive Paris insane. He thought there was something wrong with Aaron, that there was something wrong with him on a genetic level, that he'd been plagued by a sickness. He wanted to crush what he saw as weakness. Wait, Adam says, holding up his hand. What do you mean, the more it happened? How many times did it happen? At least several times. Adam looks shell-shocked. They met and fell in love several times? De La Lue takes a shaky breath. I don't know that they always fell in love exactly. Paris seldom let them spend that much time alone, but they were always drawn together. It was obvious. Every time he put them in the same room, they were like... De La Lue claps his hands. Magnets. De La Lue shakes his head at Adam. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you all this. I'm sure it's painful to hear, especially considering your history with Ella. It's not fair that you were pulled into Paris's games. He never should have... Whoa, wait. What games? Adam says, stunned. What are you talking about? De La Lue runs a hand across his sweaty forehead. He looks like he's melting, crumbling under pressure. Maybe someone should get him some water. There's too much. He says warily. Too much to tell, too much to explain. I'm sorry, I need you to try. Adam says, his eyes flashing. Are you saying our relationship was fake? That everything she said, everything she felt was fake? No, Delalu says quickly, even as he uses his shirt sleeve to wipe the sweat off his face. No, as far as I'm aware, her feelings for you were as real as anything else. You came into her life at a particularly difficult time, and your kindness and affection no doubt meant a great deal to her. He sighs. I only mean that it wasn't coincidence that both of Paris's boys fell in love with the same girl. Paris liked toying with things. He liked cutting things open to study them. He liked experiments, and Paris pit you and Warner against each other on purpose. He planted the soldier at your lunch table who let slip that Warner was monitoring a girl with a lethal touch. He sent another to speak with you, to ask you about your history with her, to appeal to your protective nature by discussing Aaron's plans for her. Do you remember? You were persuaded from every angle to apply for the position. When you did, Paris pulled your application from the pile and encouraged Aaron to interview you. He then made it clear that you should be chosen as her cellmate. He let Aaron think he was making all his own decisions as CCR of Sector 45, but Paris was always there, manipulating everything. I watched it happen. Adam looks so stunned it takes him a moment to speak. So, he knew? My dad always knew about me? Knew where I was, what I was doing? Knew? Delalu frowns. Paris orchestrated your lives. That was the plan, from the beginning. He looks at Nazira. All the children of the Supreme Commanders were to become case studies. You were engineered to be soldiers. You and James. He says to Adam, we're unexpected, but he made plans for you too. What? Adam goes white. What's his plan for me and James? This I honestly don't know. Adam sits back in his chair, looking suddenly ill. Where is Ella now? Winston says sharply. Do you know where they're keeping her? Delalu shakes his head. All I know is that she can't be dead. What do you mean she can't be dead? I ask. Why not? Ella's and Emmeline's powers are critical to the regime. He says, critical to the continuation of everything we've been working toward. The reestablishment was built with the promise of Ella and Emmeline. Without them, Operation Synthesis means nothing. Castle bolts upright. His eyes are wide. Operation Synthesis, he says breathlessly, has to do with Ella? The architect and the executioner. Delalu says, Delalu falls back with a small, surprised gasp, his head hitting the back of his chair. Everything suddenly seems to slow down. I feel my heart rate slow. I feel the world slow. I feel formed from water, watching the scene unfold in slow motion, frame by frame, a bullet between his eyes, blood trickling down his forehead, a short, sharp scream. You traitorous son of a bitch! Someone says, I'm seeing it, but I don't believe it. Anderson is here. What? I thought Anderson was dead. I'm so confused right now. I thought Anderson was dead. Juliet. I'm given no explanations. My father doesn't invite me to dinner like Evie promised. He doesn't sit me down to offer me long histories about my presence or his. He doesn't reveal groundbreaking information about my life or the other Supreme Commanders or even the nearly 600 people I just murdered. He and Evie are acting like the horrors of the last 17 years never happened, like nothing strange has ever happened, like I never stopped being their daughter, not in the ways that mattered anyway. I don't know what was in that needle, but the effects are unlike anything I've experienced. I feel both awake and asleep, like I'm spinning in place, like there's too much grease turning the wheels in my brain. And I try to speak, and realize my lips no longer move on command. My father carries my limp body into a blindingly silver room, props me up in a chair, straps me down, and panic pours into me, hot and terrifying, flooding my mind. I try to scream, fail. My brain is slowly disconnecting from my body like I'm being removed from myself. Only basic instinctual functions seem to work, swallowing, breathing, crying. Tears fall quietly down my face, and my father whistles a tune. His movements light and easy even as he sets up an IV drip. He moves with such startling efficiency I don't even realize he's removed my manacles until I see the scalpel, a flash of silver. The blade is so sharp he meets no resistance as he slices clean lines into my forearms, and blood heavy and warm, spills down my wrists and into my open palms, and it doesn't seem real, not even when he stabs several electrical wires into my exposed flesh. The pain arrives just seconds later. What the fuck is he doing to her? Pain. It begins at my feet, blooms up my legs, unfurls in my stomach, and works its way up my throat, only to explode behind my eyes, inside my brain, and I cry out, but only in my mind, my useless hands so limp, only at armrests, and I'm so certain he's going to kill me. But then he smiles, and then he's gone. I lie in agony for what feels like hours. I watch through a delirious fog as blood drips off my fingertips, each drop feeding the crimson pools growing in the folds of my pants. Visions assault me. Memories of a girl I might have been, scenes with people I might have known. I want to believe they're hallucinations, but I can't be certain of anything anymore. I don't know if Max and Evie are planting things in my mind. I don't know that I can trust anything I might have once believed about myself. I can't stop thinking about Emmeline. I'm adrift, suspended in a pool of senselessness, but something about her keeps tugging, sparking my nerves, errant currents pushing me to the surface of something, an emotional revelation that trembles into existence only to evaporate seconds later as if it might be terrified to exist. This goes on and on and on and on, light years, eons, over and over, whispers of clarity, gasps of oxygen, and I'm tossed back out to sea. Bright white lights flicker above my head, buzzing in unison with the low, steady hum of engines and cooling units. Everything smells sharp, like antiseptic. Nausea makes my head swim. I squeeze my eyes shut, the only command my body will obey. Me and Emmeline at the zoo. Me and Emmeline first trip on a plane. Me and Emmeline learning to swim. Me and Emmeline getting our hair cut. Images of Emmeline fill my mind, moments from the first years of our lives, details of her face I never knew I could conjure. I don't understand it. I don't know where they're coming from. I can only imagine that Evie put these images here, but why Evie would want me to see this, I don't understand. The scenes play through my head like I might be flipping through a photo album, and they make me miss my sister. They make me remember Evie as my mother, make me remember I had a family. Maybe Evie wants me to reminisce. My blood has hit the floor. I hear it, the familiar drip, the sound like a broken faucet, the slow tap, tap of tepid fluid on tile. Emmeline and I held hands everywhere we went, often wearing matching outfits. We had the same long brown hair, but her eyes were pure blue, and she was a few inches taller than me. We were only a year apart, but she looked so much older. Even then, there was something in her eyes that looked hard, serious. She held my hand like she was trying to protect me, like maybe she knew more than I did. Where are you? I wonder. What did they do to you? I have no idea where I am, no idea what they've done to me, no idea of the hour or the day, and pain blisters everywhere. I feel like a live wire, like my nerves have been stapled to the outside of my body, sensitive to every minute change in environment. I exhale and it turns, and it hurts, twitch, and it takes my breath away. And then, in a flash of movement, my mother returns. The door opens and the motion forces a gentle rush of air into the room, a whisper of a breeze, gentle even as it grazes my skin, and somehow the sensation is so unbearable I'm certain I'll scream. I don't. Feeling better? She says. Evie is holding a silver box. I try to look more closely, but the pain in my eye is in my eyes now, searing. You must be wondering why you're here, she says softly. I hear her working on something, glass and metal touching together, coming apart, touching together, coming apart. But you must be patient, little bird. You might not even get to stay. I close my eyes. I feel her cold, slender fingers on my face just seconds before she yanks my eyelids back. Swiftly, she replaces her fingers with sharp steel clamps, and I muster only a low, guttural sound of agony. Keep your eyes open, Ella. Now's not the time to fall asleep. Even then, in that painful, terrifying moment, the words sound familiar, strange and familiar. I can't figure out why. Before we make any concrete plans to keep you here, I need to make sure, she tugs on a pair of latex gloves, that you're still viable. See how you've held up after all these years. Her words send waves of dread coursing through me. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. I'm still no more than a receptacle. My body exchanges hands in exchange for what? My mother has no love for me. What has she done to my sister? Where is Emmeline? I try to scream, but the words don't leave my mouth. They expand in my head, explosive and angry, pressing against the ridges of my mind even as my lips refuse to obey. Dying. The words occur to me suddenly, as if it were something I've just remembered, the answer to a question I forgot existed. I don't comprehend it. Evie is standing in front of me again. She touches my hair, sifts through the short, coarse strands like she might be panning for gold. The physical contact is excruciating. Unacceptable, she says. This is unacceptable. She turns away, makes notes in a tablet she pulls out of her lab coat. Roughly, she takes my chin in her hand, lifts my face toward hers. Evie counts my teeth, runs the tip of one finger along my gums. She examines the insides of my cheeks, the underside of my tongue. Satisfied, she rips off the gloves, the latex making harsh snapping sounds that collide and echo, shattering the air around me. A medical purr fills my ears, and I realize Evie is adjusting my chair. I was previously in a reclining position, now I'm flat on my back. She takes a pair of shears to my clothes, cutting straight through my pants, my shirt, my sleeves. Fear threatens to rip my chest open, but I only lie there, a perfect vegetable, as she strips me down. Finally, Evie steps back. I can't see what's happening. The hum of an engine builds into a roar, sounds like scissors slicing the air, and then sheets of glass materialize at the edges of my vision. Moved toward me from all sides, they lock into place easily, seams sealing shut with a cool click sound. I'm being burned alive. Heat like I've never known it. Fire I can't see or stop. I don't know how it's happening, but I feel it. I smell it. The scent of charred flesh. It fills my nose, threatens to upend the contents of my stomach. The top layer of skin is being slowly singed off my body. Blood beads along my body like morning dew. Damn, she's fucking torturing her. And a fine mist follows the heat, cleansing and cooling. Steam fogs up the glass around me, and then, just when I think I might die from the pain, the glass fizzes open with a sudden gasp. I wish she would just kill me. Instead, Evie is meticulous. She catalogues my every physical detail, making notes constantly in her pocket tablet. For the most part, she seems frustrated with her assessment. My arms and legs are too weak, she says. My shoulders too tense, my hair too short, my hands too scarred, my nails too chipped, my lips too chapped, my torso too long. We made you too beautiful, she says. Shaking her head at my naked body, she prods at my hips, the balls of my feet. Beauty can be a terrifying weapon if you know how to wield it, but all this means deeply unnecessary now. She makes another note. When she looks at me again, she looks thoughtful. I gave this to you, she says. Do you understand? This container you live in, I grew it, shaped it. You belong to me. Your life belongs to me. It's very important that you understand that. Rage, sharp and hot, sears through my chest. Carefully, Evie cracks open the silver box. Inside are dozens of slim glass cylinders. Do you know what these are? She says, lifting a few vials of shimmering white liquid. Of course you don't. Evie studies me a while. We did it wrong the first time, she finally says. We didn't accept emotional health to supersede the physical in such dramatic fashion. We expected stronger minds from both of you. Of course. Evie hesitates. She was the superior specimen, your sister. Infinitely superior. You were always a bit doe-eyed as a child, a little moonier than I'd have liked. Emmeline, on the other hand, was pure fire. We never dreamed she'd deteriorate so quickly. Her failures have been a great personal disappointment. I inhale sharply and choke on something hot and wet in my throat. Blood, so much blood. But then, Evie says with a sigh, such is the situation. We must be adaptable to the unexpected, amenable to change when necessary. Evie hits a switch and something seizes inside of me. I feel my spine straighten, my jaw go slack. Blood is now bubbling up my throat in earnest, and I don't know whether to let it up or swallow it down. I cough violently and blood spatters across my face. My arms drips down my chest, my fresh pink skin. My mother drops into a crouch. She takes my chin in her hand and forces me to look at her. You are far too full of emotion, she says softly. You feel too much for this world. You call people your friends. You imagine yourself in love. She shakes her head slowly. That was never the plan for you, little bird. You were meant for a solitary existence. We put you in isolation on purpose. She blinks. Do you understand? I'm hardly breathing. My tongue feels rough and heavy, foreign in my mouth. I swallow my own blood, and it's revolting, thick and lukewarm, gelatinous with saliva. Apparently I can't turn the page. There we go. If Aaron were anyone else's son, she says, I would have had him executed. I'd have him executed right now if I could. Unfortunately, I alone do not have the authority. A force of feeling seizes my body. I'm half horror, half joy. I didn't know I had any hope left that Warner was alive until just this moment. The feeling is explosive. It takes root inside me. Hope catches fire in my blood, a feeling more powerful than these drugs, more powerful than myself. I cling to it with my whole heart, and suddenly I'm able to feel my hands. I don't know why or how, but I feel a quiet strength surge up my spine. Evie doesn't notice. I regret our mistakes, she's saying. I regret the oversights that seem so obvious now. We couldn't have known so many years ago that things would turn out like this. We didn't expect to be blindsided by something so flimsy as your emotions. We couldn't have known at the onset that things would escalate in this way. Paris had convinced everyone that bringing you on base in Sector 45 would be beneficial to us all, that he'd be able to monitor you in a new environment rife with experiences that would motivate your powers to evolve. Your father and I thought it was a stupid plan, a stupider still for placing you under the direct supervision of 19-year-old boy with whom your history was complicated. She looks away, shakes her head. But Anderson delivered results. With Aaron, you made progress at a rate we'd only dreamed of, and we were forced to let it be. Still, she says, it backfired. Her eyes linger for a moment on my shaved head. There are few people, even our inner circle, who really understand what we're doing here. Your father understands, Ibrahim understands, but Paris, for security reasons, was never told everything about you. He wasn't yet a supreme commander when we gave him the job, and we decided to keep him informed on a need-to-know basis. Another mistake, Evie says, her voice both sad and terrifying. She presses the back of her hand to her forehead. 6 months and everything falls apart. You run away, you join some ridiculous gang, you drag Aaron into all of this, and Paris, the oblivious fool, tries to kill you. Twice, and I nearly slit his throat for his idiocy, but my mercy may as well have been for nothing. What with your attempt to murder him? Oh, Ella, she says, and sighs. You've caused me a great deal of trouble this year, the paperwork alone. She closes her eyes. I've had the same splitting headache for 6 months. She opens her eyes, looks at me for a long time. And now, she says, gesturing at me with the tablet in her hand, there's this. Emmeline needs to be replaced, and we're not even sure you're a suitable substitute. Your body is operating at maybe 65% efficiency, and your mind is a complete disaster. She stops. A vein jumps in her forehead. Perhaps it's impossible for you to understand how I'm feeling right now. Perhaps you don't care to know the depth of my disappointments, but you and Emmeline are my life's work. I was the one who found a way to isolate the gene that was causing widespread transformations in the population. I was the one who managed to recreate the transformation. I was the one who rewrote your genetic code. She frowns at me, looking, for the first time, like a real person. Her voice softens. I remade you, Ella. You and your sister were the greatest accomplishments of my career. Your failures, she whispers, touching the tips of her fingers to my face, are my failures. I made a harsh, involuntary sound. She stands up. This is going to be uncomfortable for you. I won't pretend otherwise, but I'm afraid we have no choice. If this is going to work, I'll need you to have a healthy, unpolluted headspace. We have to start fresh. When we're done, you won't remember anything but what I tell you to remember. Do you understand? My heart picks up, and I hear its wild, erratic beats amplified on a nearby monitor. The sounds echo around the room like a siren. Your temperature is spiking, Evie says sharply. There's no need to panic. This is the merciful option. Paris is still clamoring to have you killed, after all. But Paris, she hesitates. Paris can be melodramatic. We've all known how much he's hated you for your effect on Aaron. He blames you, you know. Evie tilts her head at me. He thinks you're part of the reason Aaron is so weak. Honestly, sometimes I wonder if he's right. My heart is beating too fast. My lungs feel fit to burst. The bright lights above my head bleed into my eyes, into my brain. Now, I'm going to download this information. I hear her tap the silver box directly into your mind. It's a lot of data to process, and your body will need some time to accept it all. A long pause. Your mind might try to reject this, but it's up to you. It's up to you to let things take their course. Do you understand? We don't want to risk splicing the past and present. It's only painful in the first few hours, but if you can survive those first hours, your pain receptors will begin to fail, and the rest of the data should upload without incident. I want to scream. Instead, I make a weak, choking sound. Tears spill fast down my cheeks, and my mother stands there, her fingers small and foreign on my face, and I see, but cannot feel, the enormous needle going into the soft flesh at my temple. She empties and refills the syringe what feels like 1,000 times, and each time it's like being submerged underwater, like I'm slowly drowning, suffocating over and over again, and never allowed to die. I lie there, helpless and mute, caught in an agony so excruciating I no longer breathe, but rasp as she leans over me to watch. You're right, she says softly. Maybe this is cruel. Maybe it would have been kinder to simply let you die, but this isn't about you, Ella. This is about me, and right now, she says, stroking my hair, this is what I need. God, what a bitch. She's just like torturing the shit out of her. Kenji! The whole thing happened so quickly it takes me a second to register exactly what went down. De La Lue is dead. De La Lue is dead, and Anderson is alive. Anderson is back from the dead. I mean, right now he's flat on the ground, buried under the weight of every single piece of furniture in this room. Castle stares intently from across the space, and when I hear Anderson wheezing, I realize Castle isn't trying to kill him. He's only using the furniture to contain him. I inch closer to the crowd forming around Anderson's gasping figure, and then I notice, with a start, that Adam is pressed up against the wall like a statue, his face frozen in horror. My heart breaks for him. I'm so glad Adam dragged James off to bed hours ago. So glad that kid doesn't have to see any of this right now. Castle finally makes his way across the room. He's standing a few feet away from Anderson's prone figure. When he asks the question we're all thinking, how are you still alive? Anderson attempts to smile. It comes out crooked, crazy. You know what's always been so great about you, Castle? He says Castle's name like it's funny, like he's saying it out loud for the first time. He takes a tight, uneven breath. You're so predictable. You like to collect strays. You love a good sob story. Anderson cries out with a sudden rough exhalation, and I realize Castle probably turned up the pressure. When Anderson catches his breath, he says, You're an idiot. You're an idiot for trusting so easily. Another harsh, painful gasp. Who do you think called me here? He says, struggling to speak now. Who do you think has been keeping me apprised? Another strained breath. Of every single thing you've been discussing. I freeze. A horrible, sick feeling gathers in my chest. We all turn as a group to face Nazira. She's standing apart from everyone else, the personification of calm, collected intensity. She has no expression on her face. She looks at me like I might be a wall. For a split second, I feel so dizzy I think I might actually pass out. Wishful thinking. That's it. That's the thing that does it. A room full of extremely powerful people, and yet it's this moment, this brief, barely there moment of shock that ruins us all. I feel the needle in my neck before I even register what's happening, and I have only a few seconds to scan the room, glistening the horror on my friends' faces before I fall. Holy shit. Warner. I'm sitting in my office listening to an old record when I get the call. I worry at first that it might be Lena, begging me to come back to her, but my feeling of revulsion quickly transforms to hate when I hear the voice on the line. My father, he wants me downstairs. The mere sound of his voice fills me with a feeling so violent it takes me a minute to control myself. 2 years away, 2 years becoming the monster my father always wanted me to be. I glance in the mirror, loathing myself with a new, profound intensity I'd never before experienced. Every morning I wake up hoping only to die, to be done with this life, with these days. He knew when he made that deal what he was asking me to do. I didn't. I was 16, still young enough to believe in hope, and he took advantage of my naivety. He knew what it would do to me. He knew it would break me, and it was all he'd ever wanted, my soul. I sold my soul a few years ago. I sold my soul for a few years with my mother, and now, after everything, I don't even know if it'll be worth it. I don't know if I'll be able to save her. I've been away too long. I've missed too much. My mother is doing so much worse now, and no doctor has been able to help her. Nothing has helped. My efforts have been worse than futile. I gave up everything for nothing. I wish I'd known how those 2 years would change me. I wish I'd known how hard it would be to live with myself, to look in the mirror. No one warned me about the nightmares, the panic attacks, or the dark, destructive thoughts that would follow. No one explained to me how darkness works, how it feasts on itself, or how it festers. I hardly recognize myself these days, becoming an instrument of torture or destroyed what was left of my mind. And now this. I feel empty all the time, hollowed out, beyond redemption. I didn't want to come back here. I wanted to walk directly into the ocean. I wanted to fade into the horizon. I wanted to disappear. Of course, he'd never let that happen. He dragged me back here and gave me a title. I was rewarded for being an animal, celebrated for my efforts as a monster. Never mind the fact that I wake up in the middle of every night, strangled by irrational fears and a sudden, violent urge to upend the contents of my stomach. Never mind that I can't get these images out of my head. I glance at the expensive bottle of bourbon my father left for me in my room and feel suddenly disgusted. I don't want to be like him. I don't want his opiate, his preferred form of oblivion. At least soon my father will be gone. Any day now he'll be gone, and this sector will become my domain. I'll finally be on my own, or something close to it. Reluctantly, I pull on my blazer and take the elevator down. When I finally arrive in his quarters as he requested, he spares me only the briefest look. "Good," he says. "You've come." I say nothing. He smiles. "Where are your manners? You're not going to greet our guest?" Confused, I follow his line of sight. There's a young woman sitting on a chair in the far corner of the room, and at first I don't recognize her. When I do, the blood drains from my face. My father laughs. "You kids remember each other, right?" She was sitting so quietly, so still and small that I almost hadn't noticed her at all. My dead heart jumps at the sight of her slight frame, a spark of life trying desperately to ignite. "Juliet," I whisper. My last memory of her was from 2 years ago, just before I left home for my father's sick, sadistic assignment. He ripped her away from me, literally ripped her out of my arms. I'd never seen that kind of rage in his eyes, not like that, not over something so innocent. But he was wild, out of his mind. She and I hadn't done anything more than talk to each other. I'd started stealing down to her room whenever I could get away, and I'd trick the camera's feeds to give us privacy. We'd talk sometimes for hours. She'd become my friend. I never touched her. She said that after what happened with the little boy, she was afraid to touch anyone. She said she didn't understand what was happening to her and didn't trust herself anymore. I asked her if she wanted to touch me, to test it out and see if anything would happen, and she looked scared, and I told her not to worry. I promised her it'd be okay, and when I took her hand, tentatively waiting for disaster, nothing happened. Nothing happened except that she burst into tears. She threw herself into my arms and wept and told me she'd been terrified, that there was something wrong with her, that she'd turned into a monster. We only had a month all together. But there was something about her that felt right to me from the very beginning. I trusted her. She felt familiar, like I'd always known her. But I also knew it seemed a dramatic sort of thought, so I kept it to myself. She told me about her life, her horrible parents. She'd shared her fears with me, so I shared mine. I told her about my mom, how I didn't know what was happening to her, how worried I was that she was going to die. Julia cared about me, listened to me the way no one else did. It was the most innocent relationship I'd ever had, but it meant more to me than anything. For the first time in years, I felt less alone. The day I found out she was finally being transferred, I pulled her close. I pressed my face into her hair and breathed her in, and she cried. She told me she was scared, and I promised I'd try to do something. I promised to talk to my dad, even though I knew he wouldn't care. And then, suddenly, he was there. He ripped her out of my arms, and I noticed then that he was wearing gloves. "What the hell are you doing?" he cried. "Have you lost your mind? Have you lost yourself entirely?" "Dad," I said, panicking. "Nothing happened. I was just saying goodbye to her." His eyes widened round with shock, and when he spoke, his words were whispers. You were saying goodbye to her?" "She's leaving," I said stupidly. "You think I don't know that?" I swallowed hard. "Jesus," he said, running a hand across his mouth. "How long have you been doing this? How long have you been coming down here?" My heart was racing. Fear pulsed through me. I was shaking my head, unable to speak. "What did you do?" my dad demanded, his eyes flashing. "Did you touch her?" "No." Anger surged through me, giving me back my voice even as my face flushed with embarrassment. "No, of course not." "Are you sure?" "Dad, why are you—" I shook my head, confused. I don't understand why you're so upset. You've been pushing me and Lena together for months, even though I've told you 100 times that I don't like her. But now, when I hesitated, looking at Juliet, her face half hidden behind my dad. I was just getting to know her, that's all. You were just getting to know her? He stared at me, disgusted. Of all the girls in the world, you fall for this one? The child murderer bound for prison? The likely insane test tube experiment? What is wrong with you? Dad, please. Nothing happened. We're just friends. We just talk sometimes. Just friends? He said and laughed. The sound was demented. You know what? I'll let you take this with you. I'll let you keep this one while you're gone. Let it sit with you. Let it teach you a lesson. What? Take what with me? A warning. He leveled me with a lethal look. Try something like this again, and I'll kill her. And I'll make sure you get to watch. I stared at him, my heart beating out of my chest. This was insane. We hadn't even done anything. I'd known that my dad would probably be angry, but I never thought he'd threaten to kill her. If I'd known, I never would have risked it. And now? My head was spinning. I didn't understand. He was dragging her down the hall, and I didn't understand. Suddenly, she screamed. She screamed, and I stood there helpless as he dragged her away. She called my name, cried out for me, and he shook her, told her to shut up, and I felt something inside of me die. I felt it was as if it happened. I felt something break apart inside of me as I watched her go. I'd never hated myself so much. I'd never been more of a coward. And now, here we are. That day feels like a lifetime ago. I never thought I'd see her again. Juliet looks up at me now, and she looks different. Her eyes are glassy with tears. Her skin has lost its pallor. Her hair has lost its sheen. She looks thinner. She reminds me of myself. Hollow. Hi, I whisper. Tears spill silently down her cheeks. I have to force myself to remain calm. I have to force myself not to lose my head. My mother warned me years ago to hide my heart from my father, and every time I slipped, every time I let myself hope he might be a monster, he might not be a monster, he punished me mercilessly. I wasn't going to let him do that to me again. I didn't want him to know how much it hurt to see her like this, how painful it was to sit beside her and say nothing, do nothing. What is she doing here? I ask, hardly recognizing my own voice. She's here, he says. Because I had her collected for us. Collected for what? You said. I know what I said. He shrugs. But I wanted this moment. Your reunion. I'm always interested in your reunions. I find the dynamics of your relationship fascinating. I look at him, feel my chest explode with rage, and somehow fight it back. You brought her back here just to torture me? You flatter yourself, son. Then what? I have your first task for you, he says, pushing a stack of files across his desk. Your first real mission as chief commander and regent of this sector. My lips part, surprised. What does that have to do with her? My father's eyes light up. Everything. I say nothing. I have a plan, he says. One that will require your assistance. In these files is everything you need to know about her illness, every medical report, every paper trail. I want you to reform the girl, rehabilitate her, and then I want you to weaponize her abilities for our own use. I meet his eyes, failing to conceal my horror at the suggestion. Why? Why would you come to me with this? Why would you ask me to do something like this when you know our history? You are uniquely suited to the job. It seems silly to waste my time explaining this to you now, as you won't remember most of this conversation tomorrow. What? I frown. Why wouldn't I? But the two of you seem to have some kind of immutable connection, one that might, I hope, inspire her abilities to develop more fully, more quickly. That doesn't make any sense. He ignores me, glances at Juliet. Her eyes are closed, her head resting against the wall behind her. She seems almost asleep, except for the tears still streaking softly down her face. It kills me just to look at her. As you can see, my father says, she has a bit of her mind right now, heavily sedated. She's been through a great deal these last 2 years. We had no choice but to turn her into a sort of guinea pig. I'm sure you can imagine how that goes. He stares at me with a slight smile on his face. I know he's waiting for something, a reaction, my anger. I refuse to give it to him. His smile widens. Anyhow, he says happily, I'm going to put her back in isolation for the next 6 months, maybe a year, depending on how things developed. You can use that opportunity to prepare, to observe her. But I'm still fighting back my anger. I can't bring myself to speak. Is there a problem? He says. No. You remember, of course, the warning I gave you the last time she was here. Of course, I say, my voice flat, dead. And then, as if out of nowhere, "How is Lena, by the way? I hope she's well." I wouldn't know. It's barely there, but I catch the sudden shift in his voice, the anger when he says, "And why is that?" "I broke things off with her last week." "And you didn't think to tell me?" Finally, I meet his eyes. "I never understood why you wanted us to be together. She's not right for me. She never was." "You don't love her, you mean?" "I can't imagine how anyone would." "That," he says, "is exactly why she's perfect for you." I blink at him, caught off guard. For a moment it almost sounded like my father cared about me, like he was trying to protect me in some perverse, idiotic way. Eventually he sighs. He picks up a pen and a pad of paper and begins writing something down. "I'll see what I can do about repairing the damage you've done. Lena's mother must be hysterical. Until then, get to work." He nods at the stack of files he's set before me. Reluctantly, I pick a folder off the top. I glance through the document, scanning the general outline of the mission, and then I look up at him, stunned. "Why does the paperwork make it sound like this was my idea?" He hesitates, puts down his pen. "Because you don't trust me." I stare at him, struggling to understand. He tilts his head. "If you knew this was my idea, you'd never trust it, would you? You'd look too closely for holes, conspiracies. You'd never follow through the way I'd want you to. Besides," he says, picking up his pen again, "two birds, one stone. It's time to finally break the cycle." I replace the folder on the pile. I'm careful to temper the tone of my voice when I say, "I have no idea what you're talking about." "I'm talking about your new experiment," he says coolly. "Your little tragedy. This," he says, gesturing between me and Juliet, "this needs to end. And she is unlikely to return your affections when she wakes up to discover you are not her friend but her oppressor, isn't she?" And I can no longer keep the fury or the hysteria out of my voice when I say, "Why are you doing this to me? Why are you purposely torturing me?" "Is it so crazy to imagine that I might be trying to do you a favor?" My father smiles. "Look more closely at those files, son. If you've ever wanted a chance to saving your mother, this might be it." I've become obsessed with time. Still, I can only guess at how long I've been here, staring at these walls without reprieve. No voices, only the occasional warped sounds of faraway speech. No faces, not a single person to tell me where I am or what awaits me. I've watched the shadows chase the light in and out of my cell for weeks, their motions through the small window my only hope for marking the days. A slim, rectangular slot in my door opens with sudden, startling force. The aperture shot through with what appears to be artificial light on the other side. I make a mental note. A single steaming bun, no tray, no foil, no utensils, is shoved through the slot, and my reflexes are still fast enough to catch the bread before it touches the filthy floor. I have enough sense to understand that the little food I'm given every day is poison. Not enough to kill me, just enough to slow me down. Slight tremors rock my body, but I force my eyes to stay open as I turn the soft bun around in my hand, searching its flaky skin for information. Excuse me. It's unmarked, unextraordinary. It could mean nothing. There's no way to be sure. This ritual happens exactly twice a day. I am fed an insignificant, tasteless portion of food twice a day. For hours at a time, my thoughts slur, my mind swims and hallucinates. I am slow, sluggish. Most days, I fast. To clear my head, to cleanse my body of the poison, and to collect information. I have to find my way out of here before it's too late. Some nights when I'm at my weakest, my imagination runs wild. My mind is plagued by horrible visions of what might have happened to her. It's torture not knowing what they've done with her, not knowing where she is, not knowing how she is, not knowing if someone is hurting her. But the nightmares are perhaps the most disconcerting. At least, I think they're nightmares. It's hard to separate fact from fiction, dreams from reality. I spend too much time with poison running through my veins. But Nazira's words to me before the symposium, her warning that Juliet was someone else, that Max and Evie are true biological parents. I didn't want to believe it then. It seemed a possibility too perverse to be real. Even my father had lines he wouldn't cross, I told myself. Even the reestablishment had some sense of invented morality, I told myself. But I saw them as I was carried away. I saw the familiar faces of Evie and Maximilian Summers, the supreme commander of Oceania, and her husband, and I've been thinking of them ever since. They were the key scientists of our group, the quiet brains of the reestablishment. They were military, yes, but they were medical. The pair often kept to themselves. I had few memories of them until very recently, until Ella appeared in my mind. But I don't know how to be sure that what I'm seeing is real. I have no way of knowing that this isn't simply another part of the torture. It's impossible to know. It's agony boring a hole through me. I feel like I'm being assaulted on both sides, mental and physical, and I don't know where or how to begin fighting back. I've begun clenching my teeth so hard it's causing me migraines. Exhaustion feasts slowly on my mind. I'm fairly certain I've got at least 2 fractured ribs, and my only hours of rest are achieved standing up, the single position that eases the pain in my torso. It'd be easy to give up, give in, but I can't lose myself to these mind games. I won't, so I compile data. I spent my whole life preparing for moments like these by people like this, and they will take full advantage of that knowledge. I know they'll expect me to prove that I deserve to survive, and unexpectedly knowing this brings me a much-needed sense of calm. I feel none of my usual anxiety here, being carefully poisoned to death. Instead, I feel at home, familiar, fortified by adrenaline. Under any other circumstances, I'd assume my meals were offered once in the morning and once at night, but I know better than to assume anything anymore. I've been charting the shadows long enough to know that I'm never fed at regular hours and that the erratic schedule is intentional. There must be a message here, a sequence of numbers, a pattern of information, something I'm not grasping, because I know that this, like everything else, is a test. I am in the custody of a supreme commander. There can be no accidents. I force myself to eat the warm, flavorless bun, hating the way the gummy, overly processed bread sticks to the roof of my mouth. It makes me wish for a toothbrush. They've given me my own sink and toilet, but I have little else to keep my standards of hygiene intact, which is possibly the greatest indignity here. I fight a wave of nausea as I swallow the last bite of bread, and a sudden prickling heat floods my body. Beads of sweat roll down my back, and I clench my fist to keep from succumbing too quickly to the drugs. I need a little more time. There's a message here somewhere, but I haven't decided where. Maybe it's in the movements of the shadows or the number of times the slot opens and closes. It might be in the names of the foods I'm forced to eat or in the exact number of footsteps I hear every day. Or perhaps it's the occasional jarring knock at my door that accompanies silence. There's something here, something they're trying to tell me, something I'm supposed to decipher. I gasp, reach out blindly as a shock of pain shoots through my gut. I can figure this out, I think. Even as the drug drags me down, I fall backward onto my elbows. My eyes flutter open and closed, and my mind drowns even as I count the sounds outside my door. 1 hard step, 2 dragging steps, 1 hard step. And there's something there, something deliberate in the movement that speaks to me. I know this language, I know its name. It's right there at the tip of my tongue, but I can't seem to grasp it. I've already forgotten what I was trying to do. My arms give out, my head hits the floor with a dull thud, my thoughts melt into darkness.